So we are going to dive right in. Like everything we do, we have an hour set aside. We're going to try and keep it as compact as possible. We care about the quality more than we care about the filling in the space. We really respect your time, because if you're a stellar CEO, you probably got some more important things than just to sit and listen to this webinar. So we're going to be really sensitive to that. Dive right in. We do have some time for Q&A at the end. And as always, you can always stop me along the way. So we're really going to go through a few different things here, starting with mapping the CEO's role. What does that look like as a whole? What is it? And then we're going to get very tactical and talk about the top mistakes CEOs make. And then we'll talk about how we can support you. But really, our agenda is those top two things. So what is the CEO role? What even is this thing you're supposed to be doing? What are those mistakes you're going to make? And then a couple tactical tools at the end. And then we can tell you how we can support you. But, that's kind of the detail crap that you guys all know I hate by this point in time. But we have learned our lesson. Where you start with this, you can take a picture of the QR code. And our team is apparently giving away free 1-hour coaching sessions. So you can meet with anybody in our team for 1 hour. Take a picture of that code, or you can email someone on the team or whatever link you got for this. And we'll make sure you get set up. We are a help first company, and our two of our core values are help first, and your business is our business. So as you know from working with us, many of you for a long time, we won't try and sell you a thing. We just care that your businesses are being successful. So 1 hour free coaching session with us.
Hey,
probably
Eric,
for anybody in the company too. Yeah, shoot.
I do not see the presentation. I don't know if it does.
You know why? You know why, Kristen? You and your details. Because I didn't show a screen.
There we go. Looks great.
They were saying detail oriented and just bad. That was just bad. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Kristen. All right. So now you can see the screen. Now you're like, well, that's what he's talking about. There we go. So free 1 hour coaching session with our consulting team. There is your QR code. Take a picture of that, use it, email it, whatever you want to do. We'll make sure we give you help. That may even be able to be with a CFO too, CRO, COO, any C-suite, or our consulting team. We'll make sure you get set up. Okay. All right. Moving right along. If you want to email me for information, that's great. Most of you know me. A lot of you know me. I am the founder and CEO. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur and business consultant. I'm the founder and president of multiple firms. I spend a lot of my time in our two main firms right now, which is Cruise & Co. and also Cruise & Co. Finance, as well as we have a commercial painting company as well. Both of our companies have been on the Inc. 5000 before. Both of them are on it right now. And CE Painting actually almost broke the Inc. 500 2 years ago. Both are organic growth companies. They do a total revenue somewhere around 20 million. And we're growing about between 40 and 50% per year in both companies. We have about a 70-ish headcount. Both relatively young companies too. They have grown organic with no outside financing. I was a previous owner of a company called Collegiate Entrepreneurs. During that time, I owned that company. We had about 11,000 employees. We were nationally scaled. So, I've done running a lot of companies, and that's how I learned all this stuff. I was also an EOS implementer for 8 years. Great system if you're using it. We built our own system because we really are truly a consulting company, but we have a system as well. And I've run over 1,000 session days with our clients, which is a lot. So that's me. About us as a company, our mission is to help entrepreneurs and their teams live their ideal lives. Really, our kind of our North Star is to become the Deloitte of small and medium-sized businesses. We believe the SMBs, from our experience, need that, and that's what we're trying to provide. Our niche, we help entrepreneurs increase. We focus on 3 measured things: revenue, profitability, and valuation. So when you work with us as a firm, or whether we're working with you just for free to help you out, we're focusing on revenue, profitability, and valuation. Our target market, we work with small and medium-sized businesses. And we do have separate categories. So if you're a smaller business under 50 million, we have people that work with you on that size. If you're a little bit bigger, we work in that size too. We have a system that is designed for companies that really are up to 999 employees. And we work with about 100 companies right now, somewhere in that range, actively. And we do work with companies right now from $1 million up to about 500 million plus. Our value proposition, we have a system, much like scaling up or an EOS or something like that. We have our own systems called the growth system. We take accountability for the results that you get. We are very focused on the measurables of how your business performs. So we're very much a consulting company. And then we have a lot of the resources that you need also, whether they're internal of our resources or part of our finance company or one of our partners that we work with. We try and provide as many top level resources as we can. All right, let's get into why you're actually here. So the CEO role. Now, I am the CEO. I've been CEO multiple times. I am the CEO right now. So we start out with a little bit of reality. What you want the CEO role to be? Ha! Look at that. That's what we want the CEO role to be. Sitting there on a beach with a drink in your hand and chilling and kind of looking at the sun, watching the beach. Now, it's a funny slide, but I do want to put this in perspective. And I don't like to talk much about me. People know that work with me, but I get a lot of questions about my actual life. And so I want to share things that may be helpful for you. In my actual life, if I took out the consulting I do with the companies that I work with, that's me working in the business, and I am cutting that load down right now. But if I take the time I spend just as a CEO in my multiple businesses, I probably truly, and we're really about a 40, 50% on average growth rate, organic in both companies. I am set up, and what you're about to see really has me working maybe 20 to 30 hours a week in those seats. That's it. So I can work more as we gear up. I, of course, work constantly because I'm working with all you guys so much. I still do work with about 20-ish of our companies. But if I wasn't working in the business, my CEO role is really scaled to be working on the business as much as possible. And that's what I want to talk to you about, because people are like, how do you do that? Well, and then, of course, there's what your day-to-day actually looks like. And this is not all of you, but it's definitely some of you, because we work with a lot of you. There you go. There you go. There you go. Charles Anton, that could be you right there. Look at that.
Thank you. I was laughing heartily.
And sometimes that's me too. And if you work with me directly, you know that sometimes I actually do look like that. But for the whole, as a most part, we want this to be the exception, not the rule. So how do we do that? Okay, so now this is a concept I actually started to pick up on about, I'm going to call it recently, 7-8 years ago in my career. And one of the reasons is I worked with, I was an EOS implementer for many years, and you'll never hear me say anything negative about that system, because I know I'm a believer in what that system did and helped us with. But what I will tell you is that a lot of systems like that, scaling up or other systems, because they're operational systems in nature, they tend to somewhat put the CEO in a box. Because they're operational systems, and a CEO generally in operations, they don't belong in operations usually. So if you have an operating system, sometimes you can kind of feel like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? I feel like I've been put in a closet somewhere. Sometimes those systems, the message is put the CEO in the closet so they don't screw things up, because sometimes CEOs can screw up operations, there's no question. And what they don't tell you is that really the CEO is a real job. It's a totally different kind of job than an operations job. But if you want to scale your company and grow, and I can tell you that you can probably grow it a lot more than you think. If you really want to do that, you got to look at the CEO job as a real job that has accountabilities. And if you master it, you can really start to control the outcome of what your business is. It just may not be the job that you think it is. And this is where I want to get clear on this. So let's keep diving in. Let's map out what the CEO's role actually is. So we have this basic role map that we call here, or you can call it an org chart or accountability chart, depending on what systems you're using. And this is kind of how we think it how it looks. You have the CEO who sits at the top. You have a president. Now that could be a president, it can be a COO, it can be a general manager. It can be whatever it is. Now, sometimes that CEO and president box are one and the same. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Sometimes they're separate. I'm not going to spend much time on this concept, maybe a different webinar. They can be the same if you're really an operations-based type company. If you're a company that just operating is you're really an operational type company, you don't need a lot of vision. CEO and president can often be the same person. But for most companies, there is a distinction between a CEO and the president. In our system, we actually call that president role the person who runs the business. We don't even call it president. We call it the person who runs the business. Then if you can call it a president or whatever. Reporting into those seats in a typical firm You have to generally have strength in your role map or your org chart in sales and marketing, in operations, and in finance. If you don't have strength in those three areas, no matter who's doing them, you're going to struggle with your business. So this is kind of the very basic org chart role map 101. Okay. Now you can probably Google and see all kinds of past webinars we've done on this topic. So I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I am going to spend time on the CEO box. Hopefully you're going to see a lot of stuff here that you think is worth taking some notes on. You can probably get the deck from us or some other notes, but the key accountabilities for a CEO. I get this question a lot. So what does the CEO actually own? They own the following 4 things. There may be some variance, but this is what they own as a whole. They own company vision. Where's the company going? They own company culture. They own the key relationships of the business. And they own, surprisingly to some people, cash and what I call the business plan at a very high level, the business plan. Okay, so company vision, company culture, key relationships, cash, and business plan. Now, we're not going to go into the president role today, but if I was doing the role map webinar we did earlier, the president is the person who also runs the business. The president is the person who owns enacting the business plan. They own the P&L. The president owns taking out the obstacles for the leadership team and really managing the leadership team. So if you sit in the president's seat also, you have a managerial responsibility to your leadership team, and you also own ultimately hitting the P&L and taking out the obstacles to do that. So if you're in the CEO and the president seat, you own both. If you're concerned about that, set up a call, honestly. But but today's about the CEO and the importance of calling that function out. Let's keep diving in. Let's start with the first bullet, which is company vision. CEO owns where do you want your company to go? That is your mission. What is that whole thing? How do we show up in the market? Your overall strategy is a lot to that. Once again, different webinar. What is your North Star? Where are you going? Okay, we're trying to be the Deloitte for small, medium-sized businesses. We have metrics that go along with that we're trying to grow to. We have a company valuation model. We have all the kind of high-level things that North Star looks like. We have that mapped out. I own that. I work with companies sometimes and they say, well, let's come up with it as a team. Yes, you can come up with it as a team. Getting your feedback from the team is really helpful. Getting buy-in is really helpful. But ultimately, the CEO has to own that mission. They own it. They own the North Star, and they own growth trajectory. Are we a 20% organic company, 40%? Are we going to grow through M&A? Are we going to try and 10x? They own that percentage of that we're trying to grow. And it's really important because how you determine the trajectory of your business is really going to determine a lot of how your company actually functions. When I say ownership, I want to be clear because this is tough. The CEO can often get dumped on by their team members, and they can also often get a hall pass. Both of those are a problem. If the mission and the North Star are off track, for lack of a better term, would tell you that's the CEO's fault. So if your company feels visionless or that's unclear or the North Star is unclear as to where you're going in the big picture, you own that. Take a look in the mirror, organize your team to help you. You own it, okay? So let's say you've nailed that. Let's keep diving in. The next thing you own is you own your core values. We need to define those core values. What are those core values? We need to hire, fire, and reward against those core values. You need to be living them as an example. You do those top things. I'm going to tell you right now, you do those top things and you get your role map or your org chart set up right throughout your entire company. You've done 90% of the job of a CEO. 90% of the job of a CEO is making sure that the company is set up properly and that the core values are being lived at all areas of the company. You've hit 90% if you've done those things right there, okay? As I work with really big CEOs, the number one thing they tell you is the way we run our company is entirely by core values, and then stuff kind of happens. Inside that, they live our core values inside our mission, and that's how the company runs. So you got to own those core values. They also own workplace expectations. how colleagues treat each other. It's a link to core values, but it's a little bit of an ... How colleagues treat each other, setting work and life boundaries. That's kind of the culture, the work feel of working for you, what that feels like. Is it a fun place to work? Is there remote time? Big topic right now. Are we wearing t-shirts? Is it professional in terms of wearing it? Are we more dressed up? Are we collegial? Are we formal in how we interact? That kind of thing. Accountability, communication, process. It's setting the tone. So this is, notice we start with core values, but we're also setting the professional, how we interact with each other tone. So like if you work in our company, people often make fun of my CEO, of my VP of Ops of my commercial painting company, because if you put us next to each other, we've been together 20 years. We almost talk identically. We talk and treat you the same way. We are like brothers at this point. We've been together for so long because we have a very shared feeling of how we want the company to feel. And when you work with us, it feels the same. And that's really important. CEO owns that. Keep diving into the bullets. Key relationships. Leading and managing the executive team. Now you might think, well, how's that a key relationship? That's an employee. Your key relationships in your senior level should feel like your family. If you're not treating them like it's a work family, they have to earn, as do you, the ability to be on that team, but that is your family. So that relationship you have is really important. My team will tell you one of the first things I ask them in every meeting always is, how are you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Is life going well? Sometimes I'll ask, somewhat tongue in cheek, but not really, are you liking this place? Is it good for you right now? Are you okay? Where are we falling short for you? And I just ask this in like ongoing conversation, making sure my family is okay with their workplace. That's my executive team. Specific client relationships, depending on what kind of business you're in, you want to own specific client relationships, you want to own network relationships, and you want to own supplier relationships. That's at a high level. This could be banks. It could be high-level vendors. It could be high-level clients who give you a lot of business. The commercial painting company, we have people that give us millions and millions and millions of dollars of business. Those are high-level relationships I want to make sure are covered. So it's really any key relationship that can affect your business. Connectors and network relationships are part of how we've grown the consulting business. Partner and supplier, you get the idea. So I also mentioned, you didn't see I have in there cash and the business plan, which you're going to see in just a few minutes. Sounds easy, right? Well, it's not easy, but what I just showed you, that's what the CEO owns. If you get that right, your company will go like that. Okay. I know it sounds crazy. If you get it right, your company will go like that. And if you have the right people in those senior level seats and they feel connected to that mission and there's vision, there's core values, you've got it covered. That's why I work 20 hours a week in that function. It's not easy though. So why do so many CEOs feel overwhelmed and under leveraged? Here it is in a nutshell. They spend too much time on the wrong things and not enough time on the right ones. Jack Daly, if you've ever seen Jack Daly speak, is a great sales speaker. He calls these HVAs, high value activities. CEOs, because of distraction, distraction means anything from screens to emails, the worst thing ever invented, to employees who love to distract the CEO. We'll talk about that in a few minutes here. Vendors, crises. They spend too much time on the wrong things and not enough time on the right things. And people ask me, how do I spend 20 to 30 hours a week as being a CEO? And if you work with me, you'll see this, because I happen to know what 20 to 30 hours I need to be doing no matter what every week to make sure that the trains run on time in the rest of the businesses. So if you know what buttons to push, it's about making sure those buttons get pushed every week. And if you know how to push the right buttons, you'll have tremendous success. That's how people run large companies, because they know what buttons to push in their time. So you know what the high-level roles are, the high-level accountabilities are for a CEO. You know what you need to be spending to do as your actual job. We're going to talk about what the top mistakes CEOs make are to prevent them from doing that prevent them from doing those things, or prevent them from doing those things well. I'm going to dive into each one a little bit. I'll give them all to you. There we go. And then I'm going to dive into each one a little bit more. Number one is not managing cash. May sound like a micro thing to you. We're going to go over it in a minute. And you may think, well, I run a $50 million company. I shouldn't have to manage cash. I'm going to be clear what this means in a minute, but I can tell you right now, you better manage cash. Okay, so I'll talk about what that means in a minute. CEOs let go of big relationships when they shouldn't. They delegate and they disappear. They become a boomerang. I'll show what that means in a minute. They get stuck in a seat for too long. They do too much doing and not enough thinking. And they take on too much stress. Once again, the macro concept here, they spend too much time doing things they shouldn't do. Hard stop. Too much time doing things they shouldn't do. Not enough time focusing on the things they should and need to do. Let's keep diving in. Cash. You start with cash because everything starts with cash. Great expression. I think it's Greg Crabtree. Cash is king. Revenue is vanity, and profit is sanity. Now, I don't actually love that expression because I'm a big believer in profitability. But the spirit of the expression is a good one, which is you have to make sure you have cash or your business is not going to make it. And if you don't watch cash, you're going to choke. It doesn't take the place of profitability, but if you don't have cash, you're going to have a problem. So I have done this before, and I have lost, if you've been to previous webinars, I've lost millions of dollars and got myself into cash crunches because I thought to myself, different webinar also, hey, my finance team owns this. And then I would blame them. A lot of ineffective CEOs do a lot of blaming, not empowering, blaming. I would say, see, this finance function owns this. They shouldn't let me do that. And I will tell you you can certainly fire your finance leaders if things are off track, but you need to own cash or you're going to have a struggle. So in most businesses up to 50 million in annual revenue, the CEO owns the financial health of the company. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have a controller. It doesn't mean you don't have a CFO. And it doesn't mean they shouldn't be watching it like a hawk. But this is your baby. And you got to be glued at the hip with that person, not managing it necessarily, but watching it, just to make sure that you're in sync with this finance team. Over 50 million, you still own it, but you're going to want to basically have somebody in that seat that's starting to feel a little bit more like they own it. And sometimes they often do own a percentage of the company. So you really want to have more ownership. Even in a company's over $50 million, though, they're still watching cash. Your CFO should drive your company's operation via its finances, like I just said. The CFO is the person that tells you where you are, but not just that, mainly where you're going and where your obstacles are going to be. So yes, a good CFO will be informing you of those watchouts. A good CEO knows how to listen and process and to figure out and make sure those things make sense. Your CFO does not run your business. If you're the CEO, you do. This is once again part of running your business. Stay engaged, listen to recommendations from your team, and then take decisive action. I can't tell you how many CEOs I work with well. My CFO gave me all the information. And CFOs often aren't loud either, especially the ones that are under $50 million. So they'll make recommendations. There are some, I'm laughing because there are some of you do have some loud CFOs who I absolutely love. I won't mention any names. But most CFOs aren't very loud, so they'll be quiet. They'll say, I recommend at this point we do layoffs. This happened recently with a couple of our businesses. And the CEO says, okay, we appreciate that. And they don't do anything about it. And then they say, well, the CFO didn't make me do it. CEO makes decisive decisions on data provided to them. Okay, so make sure your finance function is reporting great information into you on the basis that you need to see it, but ultimately you need to make sure you decide when you act on that information, not the finance function. So mistake number one, not managing cash. Mistake number two, letting go of key relationships. Okay, knowing your customer well and serving them well is an indicator of a company's ability to grow. I own the voice of the customer, basically, in our business. And my content team and I always talk about that. So all the content you see, yes, I do not, in case you're curious, I don't write all the content. And we have a wonderful content and marketing team. I'm really proud of that group. But I own the voice of what's in it. I own understanding what our clients care about. That's why I'll never stop working with clients. I own that voice. In our commercial business, I own making sure top customers are serviced at all times. I own making sure that our product reflects what our customer needs. I own making sure I'm watching the marketplace to make sure I'm hearing what the market's telling me. And I own, everything around that strategy to make sure that happens. You must absolutely love the customers you serve, or you should not be a CEO. So you want to stay close to those customers, partners, and employees strategically to keep your finger on the pulse of the company, industry, and the market. This is, once again, don't let go of those key relationships. Watch them, stay on those customers, listen constantly, make sure you watch it. We have some very key customers in our commercial painting business that I'm especially neurotic about. It represents millions of dollars for us. I just know when to ask those questions, and I know when to visit and make sure everything's good. And that's the same thing for my leadership team. This is the same with the leadership team people too. If I have a problem with somebody in the leadership team, or I think someone's got an issue, I can't delegate that, and I'm going to go the extra mile and have that conversation. I own that. So it's a constant, really a job. It's part of my 20 or 30 hours to making sure that everybody around me is actually just okay. And if I sense something's off, I own asking those questions to make sure I get it back on track. All right, mistake number 3, delegating and disappearing. Now, you'll notice that it assumes delegation here. We're assuming that you've got that delegate thing happening in your business. Okay, so we're being a bit assumptive on this one. So we're assuming you're delegating. And if you're not, schedule your hour. But the problem becomes the delegating and then leaving, and not knowing when to really kind of stay around. You can't delegate and disappear. So without effective delegation, you're definitely going to get stuck in operator mode. There's no question about that. You will get stuck in operator mode, and you can't have that. And a lot of you get stuck in operator mode. I'll get more into that in just a minute. But you can never hand off activities to team members who are not skilled enough, not experienced enough, or simply just don't care enough to drive the desired outcome. So I'll see that with CEOs. They'll say, well, I gave it to that person because that's that person's role. But I'm not 100% confident in that person. Well, if that's the case, first of all, ask yourself why that is. Do they need training or whatever? I'll get over that in just a second. But if that's the case, you got to make sure you put in some kind of system around that, because you're not confident in that yet. So it's kind of, I call this the hand on the bike of the kid. When you're teaching your kid how to ride a bike, you're going to pedal. They're going to pedal, and they're going to think that they're doing it on their own, but you kind of still have your hand on the back of that seat. They don't know it because their confidence is building. But then when you feel like they could actually move, you let go. So you kept your hand loosely on the back of that seat to make sure they didn't fall over, to make sure that there was no accident, but they didn't know it. So you want to kind of be around and make sure you're watching stuff if somebody's not skilled enough. And eventually, if they can't ramp up, then you got to make some decisions there about whether or not the person's in the right seat. You always got to make sure you handle the things that can harm the business if they go sideways. There was a great example of this in the news recently, and it's funny. My son asked me how I thought this would be handled. Anybody go off mute and think of something that happened in the news recently and see the CEO react so quickly to it? There's a lot of interesting examples, but this one was particularly fascinating to me. I'll give you a hint. It was in Massachusetts. What happened in Massachusetts recently where the CEO acted immediately, even above and beyond what you might expect? Anybody know? All right. Apple. Anybody else shocked that Tim Cook came to come to Braintree? Well, my son asked, he said, you think that guy's actually, do you think he even knows this happened? I said, I guarantee he knows this happened, because this is an Apple store. It's got all kinds of issues around PR, around safety, around the building of his team. He knows that was an example of how you spend your 20 or 30 hours. A situation where the impact of a CEO can be massive. He made a decision in that second to say, that's a place that's critical for my business. I'm going to fly to Massachusetts. I'm going to drive to that store and meet every single person. Now, he could be trying to avoid legal outcomes. He could be trying to make sure this doesn't happen across the board. He could be trying to make sure he understands how much his employees love him. There's 20 different reasons that he did that. Point is, he knows, Tim Cook knows where that 20 or 30 hours should be spent. And I was really impressed by that. Other examples of that might be, we have it right now. I have key sales that I think can go sideways sometimes. So I might get in there and extra coach the sales team. I have a phenomenal CRO, by the way, not just saying that because he's here. He's awesome. But am I going to let him, run point on $1 million project if I think I can help control the outcome in a half hour? Definitely not. That's an example of delegating and disappearing. I'm not going to do that. That's same thing with key relationships we might lose. You might say, well, my PM owns it. Yeah, your PM owns it. Can you spend a half hour working with your PM or calling that customer just as a touch point? If so, let's not get stuck on delegating and trust. Let's keep our business preserved. Know when to jump in and know when not to. So you got to let the employee that you delegate take accountability. That's 100%, as I said earlier, but make sure you don't just delegate and then leave them. Know when to jump in, know when you can proactively help, and know when you can help proactively avoid. There is definitely a balance and an art to delegating and not getting in the middle of things and delegating and helping. Part of this number 3 is a big part of the art of being a CEO, and you've got to be able to do that. And some people tell me, I get a lot of this question, I don't want to get in there because I don't want to then be accountable. It's funny, I'm sure my team members are laughing. I can involve in stuff all the time, but they sure as heck know that I'm also going to be leaving that at the end of that, and I'm accountable for nothing. So you have to be able to master the art of jumping in and helping a lot, actually, but being able to then remove yourself without taking accountability. It's an art, but you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to jump in enough when you need to. You're not going to feel you know how to do that, or you're going to disappear when you shouldn't. Then if you have any questions anytime, you can just stop me. Once again, just said that no one will help your team after you delegate. All right. Delegating, disappearing, big mistake the CEOs make. Not delegating. Now there's another webinar, but let's assume you are delegating. Don't disappear. Number 4, becoming a boomerang. We have some things that are going to help you with this towards the end. We've got about 15 minutes left in this thing. If your team keeps coming back to you, so I know this happens to a lot of you because I watch you. If your team keeps coming back to you, you've likely created a behavioral pattern where they look to you for the answers. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be because it makes you feel good. It could be because that gives you value. You could be a service provided type person. But think about this statement. If your team has a culture of thinking they need to come to you for the answers or report into you, regardless of the reason, you have now added X number of hours to your week. And a lot of you live this. This will culturally swamp you. And these are not the things you should be doing for a couple reasons. One, they're not on your list of CEO stuff. 2, because you were going to take accountability away from them. And because it's stuff they're supposed to be doing. So you want to make sure you have a clear org structure. That's going to help you with this. And if you see them coming to you a lot, so sometimes I see this happen too. The team members will come to the CEO and the CEO will say, well, you should be handling that on your own. Now, I don't have to say that very much often because I have some rules of engagement, which I'll show you in a minute here. I have rules of engagement around this actually that are very specific, which I'm going to show you when we end here in a few minutes. But you do have to ask yourself, if they keep coming to me for the same thing, a good question you can ask is, isn't there a process for this? And then if you ask yourself and your teammate, is there a process for this? Then ask yourself, did I train it? Because you could be dealing with that kind of thing that you're created your own dependency there. And process and training will help you unwind that if that's the case. You want to make sure your employees explicitly know, based on that org structure or that role map, they want to make sure that they are empowered to make decisions to deliver on the outcomes. That's crucial. So in my team, everybody knows, here's what you own. We're not afraid of those words. You own this, you own that number, you own this, you own this, and you own this. We know when we have an issue with certain numbers, we know who owns that number. So we start by talking about that person's role in that, and we ask them if they need help. We ask them if they have enough resources. but we make sure they're empowered to deliver on those outcomes themselves. Now, this is a huge one. People hear me say this to them all the time. You probably heard me say this, one of the most powerful phrases in management. Two, in my opinion, of the most powerful phrases in management are actually, I don't know, is a big one, really powerful statement. I have no idea, or I have no idea. I just don't know. I have no idea. That's a powerful statement. And it doesn't mean I have no idea, so don't solve it. It means I don't know. You're at the end. I say things like you've reached the end of my pay grade, which means I have hit the beginning of their pay grade in some cases. And I say, I don't know. Just so you know, I know this is the outcome. Can you work on a solution and get back to me? If you're void of the answer, that's okay. But I can tell you I am out of knowledge. I'm empowering them, but also not. Notice I'm not sheltering. I'm not saying, oh, I guess we don't have to do it then. I'm saying, I know that's the outcome required, but I don't know how to do it. I have no idea. The second biggest thing for management, by the way, that I love is, I understand, what's your plan? What's your plan is one of the most powerful managerial statements ever. What's your plan? Because that takes the accountability away from you as a CEO and gives it to your teammate. What's your plan? I have no idea, really. What's your plan? Now, I'm not doing that to be frustrating and to throw things back at them. I'm saying that because ultimately, generally, I have no idea. And usually I don't. My team members are way smarter than me. And that's not hard to see if you look at their bios. So usually I'm saying, look, I know where the vision is. And I promise you, I've told you everything I know. I now do not know anymore. So if you don't know, please investigate. And if you're stuck, come back to me and I'll try and nudge you the right direction. Okay. Otherwise, you become the smartest person in the room. And once again, and I am not kidding, I am literally the dumbest person on my leadership team. No question. Number 5. Oh, team. Bad juju on this one. I've done this. I've done it for years. I still do it sometimes. I try to avoid it. I'm not going to go off script too much here because I'm so passionate about this topic, but getting stuck in another seat is mistake number 5. So if you're doing work in a non-CEO seat in your company, which is really anything other than those accountabilities at the top, you've got to ask yourself why. Here are some of the reasons. You don't have the right people, potentially. You have budget constraints, potentially. Here's the big one. And this is, when you're smaller, sometimes this is okay because you do have budget constraints. So one of the arts of being a CEO is knowing when this bullet right here, knowing when it's okay to do this and knowing when it's not okay as you scale. So this is something that you think you're good enough at. I'll be specific. I am a pretty good sales manager. It's what I do in the wild. Like that's what I do. Pretty good at closing business too. But my team needs somebody who's not at fractional capacity or not at fractional brain power. We've decided that. So even though I'm good enough to do it and I can jump in and do it, and I can even do it by myself, which I've done, the team has outgrown me. So I have a CRO, and my CRO does this job. And honestly, I think I'm probably as good as a sales manager as he is, but he's better sustainably. He's got better ideas because he's got more brain power on it, and he's better at scale for what we need. And some things he's not better at than me. So people are like, well, you need to get involved. No, I don't. I'm running at scale. He doesn't need to be better than me at everything because I happen to be good at that function. He needs to be better at scale than me, which he definitely is. I hope that makes sense because that's a big one. I get this a lot. If people that have a great marketing background, they hire somebody in the CMO seat and they're like, well, they're pretty good, but they're not as good at me at these things. Well, in those cases, you might want to jump in and help. You certainly can. I certainly help my person with certain things. But as a whole, I don't second guess their abilities as a whole. And I'm glad that I'm happy to hand the roles over because even though I'm good enough, I'm not good enough as we scale. So I try and stay out. Otherwise, you could become a seagull manager and then you go back to taking accountability again and you got a problem. Okay. Huge one, the CEOs screw up. Once they learn the job, most CEOs are ultimately really good at being CEOs. Being in another role is a time suck and may not serve you. I'm lucky. I've been getting much better as CEO in the last 8 to 10 years. I now actually can't go into any roles anymore. I'm not even good enough sustainably for any period of time because I've learned all this stuff, honestly. I've learned not to do this. So now I focus on being the CEO. And when I go in to help my CFO or I go in to help my account manager, I'm literally jumping in to visit, to help, and then I jump out and leave. Home stretch, mistake number 6. Too much doing, not enough thinking. Think sessions support greater clarity and better strategic thinking. I've had some big ahas around this topic. I work with some very big CEOs of scaling companies. One of my biggest came from a person named Warren Rustand, big person inside the EO circuit. He was an ex-chief of staff, I think, for Nixon or Johnson, one of those presidents. And now he runs, for many years, he's been running successful large businesses. And then he went on the entrepreneur circuit and became a speaker. And he's just a wonderful human. And he's helped so many entrepreneurs. And it's interesting when you go into the details with him and you say, how do you spend your day? One of the biggest ahas from Warren, actually, which he kind of said as a side note one day, that we all latched onto was, I still can't even fathom this. He spends 4 of his 8 hours of work every day with nothing scheduled. 4 of 8. Now, I've seen him speak multiple times, and I started to realize, as you become a bigger and bigger CEO and as your business evolves, it's that thinking and working on the business that we don't do because we get sucked into the lava of the business. At his level, he realizes, I think I pretty much get paid to think. So if I don't block off time, I'm not actually doing what my job is. So that statement becomes more and more true as you scale your business. And if you shortchange that sentence, you're going to have a problem. Now, this is true for all leaders in the business too, but it's especially true for the CEO who owns that mission and that North Star and all that stuff up top. There's 3 versions of this I'm going to give you. These are all in our leadership manual. If you're a client of ours, version 1 is on the business. This is taking dedicated time to sit and think. It can be agenda free, literally nothing to do, no distractions. You can be sitting, this can be somewhere, in your house where there's no screens, there's no phone around. It can be at a coffee shop. This is you just thinking on the business with no distractions and a legal pad or an iPad. Maybe you've asked yourself a specific question at the top of the page. Maybe you're bringing your roadmap or your one-page plan or your VTO. You have your plan there. You're just sitting down for an hour to spend time thinking about a problem or just thinking on the business. That's version 1. Version 2, overall learning and growth. Okay, my coach, Mark Moses, CEO Coaching, he says that one of the things that CEOs own is learning and growth. And I agree with him. We don't have as one of our top accountabilities. I think it's more something you have to do. This is dedicated time to educating yourself, checking out competitors and colleagues. As you know, if you work with us as a client, we are big believers that you must know your competitive landscape in detail. That cliche of don't worry about your competitors, worry about yourself, it is largely a cliche. Okay, you got to know them. You don't need to copy them, but you need to know them. You need to learn about broader business trends from them, identify patterns and ideas you can incorporate. So this is really learning. This is also seminars and webinars and all that kind of stuff. This is all what goes into this category. And then there's version 3, which is your shower sessions. Based on the shower principle, if you read that book, the best ideas come when your mind is engaged in something else. Spending time on activities lead to inspiration, whether it's in the shower, whether it's, sometimes it can be sleeping, sometimes it can be running or yoga, whatever you're doing to combat burnout and stay fresh. Just keep your mind open that while you're doing those things, other ideas might come to you. Keep a notepad next to you. This is a little bit more stuff that just pops into your head, but it's a great idea to keep something nearby to write on it. So you have version 1, which is working on the business, very literally taking time out of your schedule, like Warren, to work on your business. Version 2, which is learning and growing from outside resources. And version 3, which is doing things that lead to more learning. And mistake number 7 is taking on too much stress. This goes back to that stress pyramid, which gave so much activity on social media. You don't get the most out of your people or even retain them by shielding them from any difficulties. So CEOs can take on stress from their people because they care about them, they want to help them, ultimately prevent the organization from growing. So to avoid this, you want to set clear expectations, create a supportive environment, put them in a position that allows them to be successful. And in terms of management, this is where we get all this constant comments on our stuff. If you really want to figure out where should I be in terms of taking on too much, super nice people tend to take on a whole lot of stuff and say, I'll take care of it. You'll be okay. You'll be fine. We prefer you not be that, definitely, because you're going to take on a lot of accountability and your organization is going to slow down. We prefer you get closer, not really to being an actual jerk, but if you're looking at a continuum, we don't want you to be a jerk. We like you to be ideally firm, tough love person. But if you have to trend towards something or the other, stay away from super nice and head a little closer to being a little firmer. And otherwise you're going to take on way too much stress from your organization. And then you want to make sure you think about stress as redefining that as responsibility. So if you're taking a lot of stress, ask yourself, what responsibilities should I be pushing down into the organization? And then along those lines, make sure the stress is distributed equally throughout the organization. You're going to have stress. You're going to have a lot of responsibility. If you feel like you're having too much of it, it's because you have not asked yourself, what am I doing, and pushing that down. And you got to make sure as a CEO, you got to be Teflon. So people got to come to you, stuff's got to shoot off if you're a great CEO. And you got to make sure that's distributed down through the organization. People definitely want to dump stress up. Why? Much easier for them. And you just don't let that happen to you. Don't be Teflon as a CEO. Okay. Last real big slide here, and that's our rules of engagement. Now, this is a big one. So my team hears me talking about this all the time. It's a good slide for us to end on because it literally is something that I post that is on. I have a conversation with everybody that works with me, knows this, or at least most of them do. This is a very literal thing I'm going to show you. This is how I'm able to keep my workload to what it is so that I can spend time working on the business. These are the rules in which I will engage with my teammates. Now that sounds weird. You're like, oh, well, aren't you always approachable? 100% I am not. Well, I am. Under these following rules of engagement, I am 100% approachable. Outside of these rules of engagement, I am not, because I am working and doing my job. Like the got a minute thing is a nice concept, but if you're a CEO and you got a minute all the time, you're probably not being a good CEO. So one, a person can come to me with any kind of personal update at any time. So anybody wants to call me and say, my wife's pregnant, my in-laws are sick in-law, someone passed away, I just, mastered a black belt. I love that kind of stuff. My teammates are my family. If they want to share that stuff, I certainly share that stuff with them. My door is open. I love getting that kind of stuff because we are a family and I want to make sure that's encouraged. That's always welcome. The second thing I always welcome from my team is an update on the business, assuming they've solved it. Now you might think, well, what the heck? If there's something going on, and this happens all the time in my team, they know that I was involved in, I love it when they come to me and say, FYI, that got solved. Okay, that's something that I would love to hear about. That's worth it in my inbox, and you can always knock on my door. The third thing I will accept as a rules of engagement is if they have an issue and they have a solution to it. So they have to have a solution. It can be a bad solution too, but they have to have their best solution. If they already have their best solution, they can come to me and I will give them advice or suggestions on the solution. I'm willing to do that. So they have had to have already think through it though on their own, and they have to be asking me for feedback on something they've already thought of. Why? Because that's their job. My job is not to solve their problems. It's to help them be the best at their job. Okay, this is perfectly acceptable, by the way. They are vulnerable and they're coming to you and saying, I have a problem. I promise you I've tried my very best. I have no idea how to solve it. This is acceptable. In fact, you want this. You encourage, honestly, failure or that kind of stuff. You encourage this. Now, if the person keeps failing over and over again, you got to wonder if the person's in the right seat. But this is an open door. This is, I did this wrong. I made a mistake. I'm above my head. Somebody got hurt. I lost big money. I'm worried I'm going to lose big money. We encourage that. I have failed, or I have a problem. I don't know what the answer is. We embrace that and say, thank you very much. We appreciate that you've given it your very best shot. We appreciate the openness. We appreciate that you're vulnerable. Let's talk about how we can help you out. Okay. Now, once again, look above that. I'm assuming they've already gone through their own thinking and how to solve it. And now they've come to me and they said, I have no answer, or I'm just giving you something that's a failure. Okay. No problem. We have no judgment on that kind of thing. We expect and encourage failure as long as it's not too much. And then lastly, they're just burnt. They want a shoulder to cry on. They failed. They tried their best. They lost a project. We try and empower our people, not beat them up. Doors always open. Being an entrepreneur and being a teammate of an entrepreneur, working for a business is very hard. We want to make sure our people know that our doors always open. And if you're struggling, whether it's work or personal, you can always call. We're here for each other. There's a big difference between this one. We're here for each other. We're not here to solve each other's problems. Big difference. I have found that if you live these 5 rules of engagement, it will cut down on likely 75% of your engagement with your team right now, and it will isolate the 25% to being extremely effective. So you'll buy your own time back, and it will guarantee that you have extremely effective engagement with your employees, and that they will be very empowered to do what they need, and also know that you are always there to support and help them at all times. But if you're not literal about these 5 things, you're going to lose control of your organization, and your empowerment level is going to drop. So hopefully something that's helpful for you. I learned that from a guy named Bob Prosen way back when, at a time when I really needed to hear it. And it changed the way I looked at business. And that was maybe 15 years ago. So hats off to Bob Prosen for that piece of information. It really helped me out a lot. And that, just a couple last things. Remember, I think we have a couple sailors on this call, still hanging on here too. I always tell my people that running a business is often like driving a boat or being on a sailboat. When you're on a sailboat and you're driving at a race and you're the skipper, or you're on a ship, you always, as a skipper of a sailboat, you're always like, why are people moving so slow as the crew? Like, what is wrong with you? Well, they're working their butts off, just so you know. You're just driving and doing this one thing. So what may look like nothing's happening is actually their world's a little different. So just keep in mind, through all this, things look different depending on your perspective. And you want to kind of make sure that you're always seek to listen and understand first. And I've learned to calm down and understand, look, let's listen and let's be good CEOs. So just understand it's always different from your perspective. Okay, we got about 5 minutes left. But what I want you to leave here and ask yourself is that now that you've heard all this, what's one thing you might want to do to step into the role of CEO? I would ask yourself that question. And I would ask yourself that question, literally ask yourself, how much time am I actually spending being my CEO of my business? And how much time does the business actually need me to be CEO? Because it's not always 40 hours. But whatever the business needs you to be CEO, you got to make sure that you're literally doing that job for that, at least that amount of time, or your business will suffer. You won't be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish. How we can help, of course, if you need help stepping in your CEOs, we can support you, help you develop the right leadership skills, build and fill the right organizational structure, identify the right activities to give you the most leverage. We can do all that kind of stuff. We're not going to do experience sharing because of time. But of course, if you want more information, you're still hanging on there. Once again, back to that QR code. It's there. We're here to help you at all times. We do have about 4 minutes left, and that's the last slide we've got. Does anybody who's left here, we got about 30-some people hanging on. Anybody have any questions, comments, or anything else? Now we're in your time, because my time stuff is done. Questions, comments, or anything else? We did have one question in the chat. What are the drivers for the addition of a president? That's a great question. So one of the biggest drivers for the addition of a president is the CEO is not a great manager, is a big one. And you can do fractional presidents or fractional COOs or whatever you want to do. But usually the biggest driver is the CEO is a CEO type thinker, and they're just not good at managing. So you got to, like, I can manage really good for a short period of time, not really well for a sustained long period of time. So that's kind of, I'm the kind of person that needs to have a president around me, or stuff just doesn't get done. So once you find yourself in that level, you may need to hire somebody full-time, but you should bring on somebody at least part-time because it's beyond your head to be able to manage and actually run the business. Other questions? Nothing else? Well,
I thought,
go ahead, Charles.
I thought the rules for engagement was very, very good.
Yeah, Charles, it was, we probably will put it, Kristen, we should probably, I think you're still here. Kristen, we should probably put it in the toolbox, honestly, in the leadership manual. That was life-changing for me, Charles, when I learned that. And it changed. It stops the door from swinging in, except when it needs to. And people think the CEO is like it's like an answer desk. It's definitely not. It's not. It's a job. And if the CEO is doing their job, they don't have time to be the answer desk. So glad it was helpful.
Thank you.
All right, team. We are right at 1:00. We have 3 webinars in 1 week, including one tomorrow on OKRs. I think some of you are signed up for the OKR webinar tomorrow. We had one yesterday on, I think, how to finance your business. And today we're on CEOs. So busy week for us. We'd love to see you again tomorrow. We're always here to help. We're a help first company. You need us. Scan the QR code and we'll help you as much as we can. Happy holidays to everybody. We're so grateful that you're part of our community and you helped us grow. And we're here to do whatever we can for you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.